Sorrel, and this is Mark. And we're back again for Relationship Rebellion. We missed it last week because what was I doing, Mark? I can't even remember.
Something really important.
Oh, I was in with Jamie Smart and Emma McDevitt on the very final weekend training weekend of a course I've been doing with them, which was actually quite amazing. Anyway, if anyone is watching this, please say hello in the chat, in the comments, because otherwise we don't know whether we're talking to anybody at all.
I'm perfectly happy just to talk to you.
I know you are, sweetheart, and I really appreciate that. But we're kind of here to talk to other people, aren't we? That's the whole point of Relationship Rebellion.
Let's just have a conversation.
Yes.
And see what happens.
See what happens.
Because somebody might join in.
What or who shows up.
Precisely.
And of course, if you're here, you can join in by putting, because I can see comments, which is quite cool. So today we're going to talk about values. We do this. We go for a coffee in the morning on Saturday, and we talk about what we're going to talk about at 2 o'clock. And today we decided to talk about values. And it's interesting, actually, because like probably 95% of people in the world, Mark, is it okay to tell them what happened? Or would that be outing you as a...
Would that be this morning?
What?
What happened when, where?
In the cafe.
In the cafe? Yes, that's fine.
So, yes, Mark said to me, what are your values then, Sorrel? And I listed about 5. And I said, what are your values? And he said, I've never thought about it before. And I think this is probably true for most people, because when I start working with a new client, we do the history first, so we kind of know what's been going on for them. And then often in the second or third session, we get to their values. And this is about people understanding that they've been operating from values that may not be their own values.
You'll definitely have some. The question is whether you recognise them and their effects in your life.
Absolutely. You've nailed it. You've got the job.
Bang.
So, yes. So what happens is we all take on values as children. Some people, it's like these, my values largely reflect my mum and dad's values, and values I get from Quakerism. And some of them are new values that I've made up for myself. Some people go into rebellion and they just kind of turn it on its head and say, well, if it's black, then I'm white. If it's white, I'm black, sort of thing. That probably didn't come across the way I meant it to be, but it's like a negative image. For those of you who know about old-fashioned cameras and film, this is not really helping, is it? If you're aged over 45, 50, you'll know what a negative is. Anyway, so when you go through this values exercise, you start to recognize which values you kind of agree with and which ones you're thinking, do I really think that? And actually, the other thing is that some people don't even know what a value is. Now, that's interesting. So they might say, oh, well, I value my children are values. But children cannot be values, because if you can put it in a wheelbarrow, it's not a value.
It's a thingy.
It's a thing or a person. So it's kind of ideas and concepts and stuff that's important to you, like peace and love and harmony and integrity and so forth. And love. So we thought today we would talk about what happens in relationships when the couple's values are not aligned.
So, and as a rolling example,
yeah,
this is a Quaker, right? And I'm a soldier, right?
Wow,
so you could not get further apart with regards to values. The question is whether love will triumph all of those differences.
Well, also, you did get off the foot because you were a medic, but you never killed anybody.
No.
So actually, no, this is interesting. So when I met Mark, you want to say something else before I stop?
No.
When I met Mark, and he told me I can't remember how it came out, but he did say something about the army, I think, and I thought, oh shit, am I fancying a squaddy? And then you said you were a medic, and I thought, oh, that's okay then, because he was repairing people rather than breaking them up, as it were. So I was able to align with my value, which is around non-violence.
You were able to forgive me because I wasn't as horrid as you thought I was going to be.
Well, you could put it that way if you want to. Yeah, I mean,
and you did pick me up in a Quaker meeting.
I did pick. Anyway, I'm going to just repeat my request. If anyone's here, please make a comment so that we know that you're watching. So that would have been interesting, because had Mark turned out to be oh, I don't think I want to go down this route.
Very right wing.
Yeah, well, actually, it wouldn't have happened, would it? You wouldn't have lasted 6 months in a Quaker meeting if you'd been very, very right. Well, you might have done, but you'd had to do so by keeping very quiet. Anyway.
So it's about getting on with your values that you bring to the relationship. And in the relationship, refining your values so you can have a bloody relationship. Because if you don't, you continue to inflict your values upon the other party. And it's pants.
It is pants.
Yeah, so it's not a good it's not a good working model.
And
so this is about being hard-minded, isn't it, really? And hard-hearted.
It's about how not to be hard-minded, I suppose. Isn't it? For the relationship to work. So I thought of something just like 10 minutes ago. It's a story about a friend of mine who, she got pregnant, and she and her husband wanted to decide on a name for this child, and they knew it was going to be a girl. And so they decided, and I think this is a lovely idea, they'd each make a list of 10 names that they'd like for this daughter who was about to arrive into the world. Or perhaps she'd already been born, I can't remember the details. Anyway, they both wrote down 10 names they liked. And the two names at the top of the two lists were different. I don't know what they were, it doesn't matter. The second name is the same. So they gave her the second name on their two lists. And maybe she got the other two first names as middle names. Again, I don't know the details. And it's like, how do you prioritize your values, isn't it? Because I guess it's a bit like choosing your battles. So if you try and impose all of your values, even the ones that actually aren't that important to you anyway, why did you put them on your list? Number 10 on the list. That's not going to work. But if you can agree on, I don't know, you're not going to do this consciously probably, but the 3 or 4 or 5 at the top of the list.
Which is probably what brought you together in the first place.
Well, hopefully, yes. If you've got something in common, you're probably going to have some values in common. But this ain't going to work if you don't even know what your values are. So I guess where you've got disagreements about things, it might be worth exploring where values have come into play that are being dishonoured sounds a bit weird. That's probably the wrong word to use, but not being honoured. Yeah. And I think we've never really talked about this, have we? It's interesting. But we've probably navigated the waters without actually using the word values until today, which is...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wonder whether there's anything else that we do that we haven't thought of, which is kind of maybe going on to the more unconscious level.
Well, you see, this is really interesting, because once you know how to bloody behave, the rest of it all falls into place. And so the reason we haven't had any really big debates about values is because I haven't pissed you off enough. Otherwise, we would have led into that conversation. And fascinatingly, because most married couples talk for about maybe 15 minutes a week.
Is that a figure?
It is a figure.
Wow, that's frightening, isn't it?
The conversation is likely to be quite compact and with no space for values.
And if
this is a leisurely conversation we're having between two people who are actually quite fond of talking to one another. Yeah,
actually, for those of you out there watching, if anybody is, we spend a lot of time talking, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't spend every day together, but when we're together, we spend a lot of time talking. Probably at least an hour and a half, if not 3 hours a day. I've never timed it, so it'd be interesting to stop. Why don't you even know to stop what?
You can go, love. You can. All right, she's coming on. Open your ears. I wanted to use that all day.
I hope we haven't deafened anyone. I hope you haven't deafened anyone. I have to admit, we don't have much we disagree on. But I think for me, okay, so this is something I've noticed about me, and I've talked about this before, is that overpowering need, or so it seemed, to be right. And I've realised that actually that is not such an important value or such a powerful need as the value I place upon our relationship and the connection we have.
Well, actually, the need to be right is a need for respect. And if you're actually surrounded by affection, and acceptance,
That's
you're
also
not entirely so needy for that respect thing.
Because the need, that need is being met in other ways.
You feel safe. If you're
Yeah.
surrounded by affection and acceptance, you'll feel safe.
Yes.
If you're not, you're going to need to take on a more defensive stance, which is bloody being right.
Yes.
And actually, you know, it's actually it's interesting because it's a very man thing to want to be right, to need to be right.
It's also a boarding school thing.
And it's also a boarding school thing. Mm. And it's a place of safety, we think. That's why we cleave to it.
Certainly feels like it.
Absolutely. But it's also a lonely space because you're crap company.
And also the other thing is, I think my experience was that if I could prove that I was right, I would then be safe. But I so often did not prove that I was right. Well, I might have proved it to myself, but not you, the other him, the one before. I'm sorry, that sounded terrible too.
Strumpet.
You are awful. My ex-husband. Anyway, yeah. So because I wasn't able to convince him that I was right, I just felt crap all the time. But there could have been other ways. Why? Well,
because he thwarted you, you didn't feel safe.
Something like that. Yeah. And yeah, we kind of agreed to disagree sometimes, don't we? We don't have any major disagreements really, but there are little things that we don't agree on, and that's fine. I mean, that's normal. I mean, it'd be a bit weird if we were 100% in alignment, because I don't think that's a thing.
Is that my dirty low-life friends you're referring to?
I'm not referring to anything in particular. You do? No, they're not. They're all washed.
Yes. So this is finding harmony, isn't it? It's finding harmony in between.
Yes, it is.
And yes, and it's definitely a frequency.
I'm just kind of. I think it's about prioritizing, isn't it? The most important thing for me is our relationship. The other stuff, like, I don't know, being right, being clever. I can't help if I'm clever. That's just how I am.
But, do you know? Yes, you see, this is your values have moved from what you are into what you have.
I think, and also
that's interesting, isn't it?
And that is interesting. And also, I think it's that thing about being, like my friend John Britton talks about self with others, which is basically that we only have selfhood. Is that a word? In relationship, we don't have it on our own. And once you start to sort of align with that and recognize that being in that, you know, it could be your relationship with your partner, it could be with your children, it could be with your best friend, it could be with your, for me, my sisters are important. I've lost my thread now. Oh yeah, once you start to recognize that that's so important, then the other things kind of recede into the background. So I guess it's prioritization sounds a bit weird, but it kind of is that.
I think it's about taking something sort of etheric as values and then bring it down to ground level and knowing how to use it.
Yeah.
And you value our connection. It's much more important than any sort of vague philosophical point. And you also know that I'm stupid, so it's highly likely that I won't agree with you
that you're stupid, because
on occasion.
You're not stupid.
And that's how we get out of jail for
disagree
free.
With that all the time. He's always telling me that he's stupid. Yes. And I say, no, you're not stupid.
But then she won't listen to me.
That's not true.
Tyrant.
That's what he's after.
I like it when they're strict.
So anyway, if anyone's watching this, please put a comment in, because we've had none so far. We're nearly halfway through.
Well, it's a good job. We might have been talking nonsense. It sounded pretty good. It sounded pretty good.
On the replay.
So basically, what we're saying is to have a half-decent relationship, you have to leave all your silliness behind and try and be nice about it. And that includes not pressing a vague point that makes no difference, either to the left or the right of the matter.
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it.
Yes. And then, and communicating in a peaceful way. And that means I can say anything to you and you'll just let me off, really. You won't agree with me. You won't shout at me unless I shout at you.
You don't shout at me.
Well, of course I'm not going to shout at
we
you.
don't. We've never shouted at each other, have we?
Well, it's just a crap way of communicating.
I don't even shout up the stairs to get to come down.
Well, thank you very much.
I mean, you did tell me quite early on that you didn't like it when people shouted upstairs.
I don't like being shouted at, so thank you.
That. actually come to the bottom of the stairs and then speak loudly.
And she whispers forcefully.
Anyway, we've gone off with the point, haven't we? But the whole point about this is relationship rebellion. We're not supposed to. We're taking this serious out of relationships. That's the other thing about relationship rebellion, is that you don't want to be serious.
Heavy love. Love isn't heavy.
Right.
Love isn't heavy. Love is an easy fit. And if it's not an easy fit, then you need to take it to the tailor. Yeah. Love is supposed to be an easy fit, and we make it an easy fit. And sometimes we have to lose a bit of our mass with regards to the ideas. Maybe that will make it work.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's a lovely metaphor for making something be with you.
Do you know the other side about that? The other thing about that is when you say something, and my first reaction is, "Oh, I don't think I agree with that," or "I don't think I believe
all
that."
All the time. Sorry. Carry on.
Seriously. Because I've got very good. I think I've got very good at doing this. You may disagree, but I think I've got very good. I just stop myself from jumping in, and I wait. I think, maybe there's something in this that I haven't seen before. Maybe there's something I can learn from this, because Mark knows stuff about things that I know very little about. There's lots of experience Mark's had that I'm glad to say I've never had, actually. A lot of it's been quite hard. And then you've had some experiences that I'd love to have had. And either way, there's stuff that I don't know, and obviously vice versa.
And vice versa, yes.
And for me to think that here I am again. For me to think that I know everything about everything, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? And okay, I would admit that I don't know everything there is to know about quantum physics.
You see the ego.
It's so having kind of
the size of a planet.
My planet-sized ego. And
I do notice this though, with some really, really, really posh, clever people.
Yes.
They're idiots in relationships.
Yeah, they can be.
Absolute,
I know.
Totally unaware. No penetration of thought. No awareness of how the other party feels at all.
Because they're so focused on that little thing that they're so good at.
Yeah, absolutely. And they think that is their value, and it's not their value.
No, you are.
A person's value can be gauged about how you feel with them.
And I think that also brings us to the question of identity. Because when the work that you do has become such an important, integral part of your identity, and the biggest chunk of it, as it were, if you can talk about identity in chunks, then other things are going to get pushed to the side.
Then you are already in love with your identity. You're going to have not much left for these people over here. You're lost already. This is artists all over the shop.
Are we not all in love with our identity?
Not to the exclusion of all other things. If you cannot move away from that in other areas,
yes,
then you are a slave to your identity. People like your identity, but what they really like is to be able to talk to someone who will listen sweetly and be with someone who will look easily.
Yeah.
And that's good company. Now, if it just happens to be all of this other stuff too, then that's a bonus. But the first bit is vital.
So that relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'd say also, if your identity is so focused on the one thing, there's no space left, is there, for
growth.
Those kind of relationship, the whole kind of relationship skill set thing that we talked about before.
Yes, precisely. So, and it takes time. It takes time. Otherwise, everyone would have happy relationships, right? So it takes time to develop into this relationship skill thing.
It does, and we are, in our culture, we're so focused on competition and achievement and winning. That's what most people are focused on, until they realise that it's kind of messing things up for them.
Well, is it not a base appetite of victory and blood? I really just think, God, well, isn't it? Compete on every level.
Well, it is base.
I have met a whole bunch of deeply damaged, lonely people who compete on every level and then wonder why they are deeply lonely.
And trying to impose their will on
people
and all those sorts of things.
And, to have dominion over anyone is actually crap for those who are having dominion put over them. And, I've met lots of really big characters. I think that, what's his face? The Mork and Mindy guy?
Robin Williams.
Robin Williams. Now, there was a man who needed your full attention
Yes.
He talked all the time. He told you about himself and his anxiety all the time. And he would watch and observe. But in a relationship, he was so troubled in his relationship with himself that he couldn't possibly have a relationship with anyone else. You know, such people get really lonely and commit suicide.
And did he commit
Yes, he
suicide?
did. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely
life,
did.
Yeah.
Because you get lost in your own maze, into your own mind.
There's something about Robin Williams and his need to be seen, isn't there?
Yes.
And when he wasn't performing,
he was lonely.
He was lonely.
That's
and
right.
He felt like, even I don't know about his relationships, but feeling like he wasn't being seen unless he was performing.
Yes, and you know, this is really interesting because when you get a lot of appreciation like that, the big hit, all right, the whopper, everything else is a bit of a also ran. You know, nothing else gives it to you anymore.
It's a bit like taking drugs, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
Yeah, it is a drug, isn't it?
That's right. And once your love experience is set at that level, everything else is going to be a bit of a disappointment, and you would have to rehabilitate yourself to real people.
And in fact, that kind of performance doesn't work in a relationship because it's all one way.
Yes.
And it isn't, you can't even do it taking it in turns. You can't have, I do my monologue for half an hour and you do your monologue for half an hour. That's not how it works.
This is the interesting thing. I've noticed that when people have the compulsion to talk, absolute compulsion to talk, it's because they are unseen, unheard, and they're trying to discover who they are. And when they're listened to, they feel like they exist more, and therefore they feel better.
I think that's really crucial.
And so lots of people they show their agony. They show their loop.
They do, because you can see the agony because they can't stop talking. It's they're locked into this.
That is correct. And it's almost like an animal in a zoo doing the rounds of the cage. It's prisoned in exactly in a very similar way.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I can see. I think that's a really good metaphor. Do you know what I know in the before I met you and certain okay, I've got plenty of time.
Better say something cheerful.
I was just thinking before I met you and certain of your friends, I knew this pattern of people who couldn't stop talking, and I used to think there's something they're afraid of. They're afraid of what will happen when I stop talking, but I never could work out what it was they were afraid of. And then when you started talking about the same pattern, I think you pointed out that it's like that thing about being seen and heard, and then it starts to become apparent. It's about feeling like you don't exist if you're not being heard.
That is correct.
Yeah, and that strikes me as being something time to bring on the softwares, because it's getting a bit serious. But yeah, that's something where people needing something that they're not getting.
Well, we do need it. We talk about skin hunger, but there is also the matter of attention hunger. And I notice that children are always saying, "Look at me, mummy, look at me." Mummy.
Oh yeah.
And because it makes them feel better, they love it. And I also have seen the same tiny people wait amazingly patiently in a face painting queue for about 45 minutes.
Oh yeah, because of that attention.
And they don't do that unless it's going to be good. Come on. And they go in there and that lovely artist goes 15 minutes and turns them into whatever.
It's like a children's facial, isn't it?
It is. And they come out of there and they're all sort of blissed out and everything. It's like, and so something has filled them and something has given them peace.
And actually, if you kind of roll it back a bit to when they were babies, they probably were getting a similar level of attention because of the amount of physical care that babies, everything from the bath.
Well, full on contact.
Yeah, full on contact, everything.
So that's not got skin hunger then. We won't have skin hunger.
But later on,
when it's not cute anymore,
well, yeah,
it's going to have to develop some graces.
Particularly if it's been told that it's too big to sit on daddy's lap, for instance.
These things like that.
Those sorts of things, yeah.
So,
yeah, I had an idea, but it's gone in one head. It's gone in one side, out the other side of my head, so never mind. Is there anything else we want to say about values before we wind up? And is no one's watching today. I'm really disappointed. Well, people will watch it in the replay and then they'll say something in the comments afterwards. She says, ever optimistic.
I really like talking when nobody's listening.
Do you now?
Because in a world where everything you say will be taken down and used as evidence against you.
Sweetheart, this is going to be on Facebook and LinkedIn in perpetuity, or until those establishments fold under the pressure of whatever. Actually, you can't delete things. It's not entirely impossible.
So this is how tomorrow is going to see us.
on the day off. You're a shocker, you really are.
Get on with it.
We've got 5 minutes left. So what's the other value that comes to mind as we sit here giggling together? Oh dear, did I put you on the spot?
No, not at all. I can make up anything. What was the question?
What's the other value that instantly comes to mind as we sit here giggling and laughing together? Something that's very important to both of us.
Well, every moment you make a contribution to your environment with your mood and your being.
And that's not a value.
So, therefore, if you value a lovely, fluffy, easygoing environment, then you better put some in.
Do you know what's funny?
That's a value.
Is that I was going to say it starts with F, and then the next letter is U. And then you said fluffy, so that makes 3 words that start with F. Actually, I was thinking of fun. That was a rhetorical question, wasn't it?
Yes, and you know, fun's really interesting because people think it happens to them, and fun doesn't actually really happen to you. Fun is something you make. Children know how to make fun.
Yeah.
They're just like, okay, and you know, turn the cup up.
Children are really good at making. I'm sorry, but I've got to say about my nose. Oh, it's the hay fever, everybody. I'm so sorry.
I've got a hair up.
Well, he plays with the hair and my nose blow.
Yes, and so I think that warmth, I think that easy mind and an easy heart are two really lovely things, are some lovely things to bring to a relationship. And in fact, I don't think you should enter them unless you've got that stuff. Even in crisis, one has to have a place where...
I don't like to make prescriptions like that.
Well,
however, I think if you know that these things are important, if you figured that one out, then for goodness sake, bring it with you. And if you haven't figured it out yet, then as you do so, how can you bring it into a relationship? So if we were to say warmth, fun, generosity, for me, a big one is unconditional acceptance. I mean, there are some things I probably would be a bit off about, but most stuff is fine. So yes, once you've figured it out, then it's like, how can you bring those things into being? Because they're so important, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, what you're saying is in this relationship, please be your best you. Consciously be your best you.
Yeah.
Just don't, you know, hope it happens. Like, make a point of that.
And also recognizing that you can. So, I mean, it's a bit late to bring up Terry Real, but Terry Real is an American couples therapist, and he talks about engaging with the person's wise adult to bring the bit of them that's, shall we say, acting out, the adaptive child who's bullying their partner or whatever, and saying, come on, man, you're better than this. You need to get this bit of you under control.
Yes.
So that kind of thing.
Quite right. And, you know, it's about the relationship, for me, is about build. And it's what you put into it. Build, it's all about build. And if you put lies and you put irritation, you put tetchy ass and you put all kinds of complications in there, that's what you got, mate.
To destroy Harriet's ears.
So,
but I think the really good thing about you, Mark, is that you do get tetchy sometimes.
I do.
So do I, for that matter. When you get into a tetchy zone, you take yourself off to the studio,
because I know I'm
and
tetchy.
you come back completely detached.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the first time you did that, I was absolutely stunned. I didn't think that was a thing. I didn't think it was possible, but it was amazing. It's bold, David.
What a relief. What a relief. I mean,
I just thought, you know, if somebody's in a really bad mood, they'll be in that really bad mood for probably a week. But no, for Mark, it was, I don't know, a couple of hours maybe. I forget how long it went on for. And you went down to the studio and then you came back later on and you were all happy and fun and lighthearted.
Well, that's because I just needed to correct my condition.
And you did so really well, and you always do. And actually, that's the other thing that we've been saying in the last week is the importance of having alone time for both partners. And that means not just alone as in I've gone to work, so I'm not with my partner, but I'm alone on my own, being with myself, spending time with myself, and that's brought us to the end of the half hour.
Fair.
Do you want to have a last word?
Bless you all. Probably be all right. Cheerio. See you next week.
No, you won't see us next week because I'll be in Oxford visiting my daughter.
She'll be in Oxford seeing her daughter.
So it'll be the week after, which is the 8th of July. So we will see you then. Bye, and bye from Harriet too. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. I don't know how long it takes
I don't know.
to end.
This is when you know the tail end.